Okay, welcome to the LitCon convention panel on fantasy world building with a YA perspective. And I'm your host, A.F. Stewart, also known as Anita Stewart. And our two panelists tonight are, in A.A. Warren's case, tomorrow, because she's in Australia and it's Saturday.
Yep.
And our two panelists are Julia Allen, also known as J.K. Allen, and Amanda, who's also known as A.A. Warren. So welcome to the panel. And why don't you introduce yourself? We'll start with Julia.
Hi, I'm Julia. I write as J.K. Allen, and I write primarily young adult urban fantasy. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm also an editor providing services at hijinkswriter.com.
Okay, great. And Amanda, you introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Amanda, or A.A. Warren, and I write speculative fiction for young adults and adults. I've got 5 books out now, and I also publish anthologies.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah,
you're both in the future.
Something dear to my heart, anthologies. As anyone who's been on my Amazon page knows that.
Yeah.
So we'll start off with one of the questions I have, and it's what was, when you were world building your books, especially your YA books, what was the focus of it, and did you go into it thinking about your young adult audience?
That's a loaded question.
Couple parts to that question. Yeah. As far as the interesting thing, I brought this up a little bit before the show, but the interesting thing about young adult is you don't just have the young adult readers, you also have adult readers. So it's kind of this push and pull of also lending legitimacy to your young adult readers as well, that you're not infantilizing the world or your readers or treating them as lesser just because they're young adult. It's a young adult book. I know a lot of people have the kind of conception that young adult books are a little simpler, a little easier, and I really like writing books that I love, regardless of whether they're young adult or for adult readers. So I try to approach my world building in a similar way you would to an adult book, as far as making sure it's realistic and has depth and believability and all the layers that you would want. I kind of can cheat a little bit because I write urban fantasy, so it's kind of set in our world. So I can just kind of peel back a layer and have my magical world or my supernatural world, but it's built into our world. So that's where I kind of play with believability and what's going on with things like that. I don't know. How about you, Amanda?
I am totally kind of the same and totally different at the same time. So my worlds aren't on Earth, other than Concealed Power, the Hidden Truths trilogy. That's set in Phoenix, Arizona, and but then we have the aliens come in and they affect the people, but it's not done in a way that changes the world. So it's very much set in Arizona, where I travel through Google Maps and pick out where everything's going to be set. For my other books, like The Reluctant Wizard, and that's the young adult one, it's a totally different world. And I'm looking at how massive the planets are, how fast do they rotate, how far are they away from the sun, how does that affect, the people and how they grow foods, and is the oxygen level enough like it is on Earth, or does it change the color of the sky? So I kind of look at all these macro things and then whittle it down to the micro and see how it affects the everyday life of that character. And then with these effects, they kind of impact on the storyline that I'm trying to achieve. So world building for me is very much the main component, as well as characterization and the plot. So I have these 3 strands and I plait them. And if I'm too heavy on the world building, I neglect these other 2 strands, and then they end up, it's not right. I have to unpick it all and then replait it again. So I kind of come to story as this plait. And so world building is one of 3 main components for me. So that's how I kind of juggle it a bit, but it can get very technical and it can be very wishy-washy at the same time. So I just allow the story to dictate what it needs to have.
Okay, so Amanda, you mentioned you do all this research and you do all these background details. So for the both of you, how much research do you do and that actually doesn't get in the book? Because I mean, I know I've done a lot of research for my historical fantasy I'm writing, and not a lot of it's going to go in the book, but it has to be done because you need to know these things.
Yeah, you need to know it to know that you don't need it.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say, like, for me, I like to know how to write a sentence so that it shows I know what I'm talking about without putting in all the details that I know about. So, like, you write that sentence and you mention that one detail that lends that authenticity to the story without being like, let me tell you the 20 facts that I just researched for the last hour, because I do a lot of research on locations and stuff that goes into, making the city believable when my characters visit it. But I don't want to be like, this building is the tallest building in Seoul, and, like getting into technical facts and jargon. So it's more of crafting the knowledge into the background of the story, where it's like you're painting that setting for people without being like info dumping.
Yeah, totally agree. So for me, it's more I research widely in all different things, and I'm picking apart ideas, and then they kind of filter into many stories at the same time. So that's when I'm learning about the oxygen in the air and the different color skies and things. I was learning that just for the sake of learning it, and then I just apply it into all different stories when I need it. So I'm kind of like a generalized researcher. I just find something that I'm interested in and just jump into that rabbit hole, find it, and then take notes. And then I have like sleeves, that like little folders. I go, okay, this is relevant for this story and that story, and it just becomes a little slush pile of notes that I lean onto when I start to draft a story.
Yeah, it sounds like my bookmark folder.
Yeah.
On my room.
yeah. But I'm old school. Everything goes down on paper and pen. So.
Oh yeah, I used to do that until the boxes started piling up. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, when you have more boxes than house, that's an issue.
Yeah. I've got like 3 boxes for the Arthurian on the Arthurian stuff in Roman and Roman Britain. So yeah, that was fun research.
Right.
That never even got published.
I have a question for you ladies. I know my favorite thing to do for research is to interview people, but how do you guys like to research for your stories?
Well, a lot of my stuff is historical, so unless I'm doing a seance, I'm not interviewing people.
Right.
So I like to go and and go through the historical websites, like English Heritage is a good one. I like.
Oh.
And they have some excellent videos, and especially for my Camelot Immortals one, they had drone footage of Stonehenge.
Oh, nice.
Which was great because it gave me a really good view of the site, because I've never actually been to England. So.
Oh, you're missing out on the magic.
Yeah, I'd love to go someday, but I haven't been there yet. But
yes,
my niece has been there, and she was helpful in the research too, and she got a dedication for that. So.
Yeah.
So you got to interview your niece about it.
Well, yeah, I guess I did.
Yeah. See, I think that's just like a fun way to like really get a feel for like what is the city like, or like what is it like to walk through the streets of London, like interview someone who's been there and like get the sights and smells and all that stuff. Yeah.
But the maps are
there.
Maps are great when you're doing the historical stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. And but what I also like is the travel sites.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because I had to do a lot of modern day research for my book, and the travel sites are great because you can, especially and the I'm trying to. Okay, now I'm blanking. The real estate sites. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because like I had to get a feel of how English cottages. Because my main character, she's living. I'm not. She's kind of living in. I call it a cottage, but it might be like a big farmhouse that's been converted, sort of thing. So I went on the Lake District real estate sites, and I just looked through all the pictures, got an idea of, and you can go right inside the houses and look at the rooms and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. I use ancient texts for my research. So it's all like the little fragmented text, and they try and put them together, and I have to speculate how this story comes together. And they're like, we think these are the pages, and then I shuffle them around and go, no, I'm going to find my own way through these texts. So I'm really leaning into that. But I just recently started hypnosis therapy. So I'm hypnotizing mostly my husband, and I get all sorts of interesting stories back in past lives, and it's fantastic. So I'm using that as research as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. PD Oliva, another author, is going to be on the panels. He's a hypnotist too. So.
Yeah. So I'm only new to it. Next year I'll be qualified, but just in the little pieces of little practices that I've done with so much information, I was like, I feel like as a researcher you need primary research, and I would love to go travel through Jordan and Egypt and all these places, but our current world is just not going to happen. And you need a ground zero and I feel like hypnosis is it for me on terms of research. But then, one day I'll go to these wonderful places and explore them myself. But it's hard when I'm writing off-world things, and there's only so much you can bring from this planet onto my stories. So I have to really speculate and discover the weird stuff about our planet, and that's what I'm kind of focusing on. But the ancient stories, like if anyone wants to start off doing that, there's so many stories of layers, and this is pre-religion, pre-Bible, pre-Quran, all of those, and you kind of get to the roots of these stories, and it's just amazing. Like it just opens my mind every time I go, I found another one. Like, so they kind of bleed into my stories as well.
Okay. Apparently, LitCon has said hello.
Hello, Joe.
And they're broadcasting. And now they're rating us. Yeah. Just don't get too cheeky there over at the LitCon Lounge, or I'll break up the weapons. So.
Yeah, business.
It'll be a Viking raid. Okay, so next question. So I know both of you kind of have school elements in your books, because I know your main character Julia is a teenager, and you've got the kind of wizard school in your Reluctant Wizard, I believe, right?
Yeah, so it's a very different type of schooling system. So Eli is in this poor community. He's struggling. There's poverty. There's just a ongoing war for generations between the wizards and the warlocks, and the community are the ones who suffer. So you've got that traditional teaching system where people who are out of work, injured, or elderly teach the children, but there's not many teachers because they're struggling to survive. So Eli gets a chance to travel to the wizardry lands and attends the prestigious academy. But when he gets there, it's not like a schooling system that we have. It's more like a university system where you get thrown into some research and you literally grow your magic. So the thing about this world is that every single person has magic, but whether you're useful or not will determine your worth in society. So everybody has different little bits and pieces to do with their magic, and it's not about learning it or taking on more magic. It's about growing your own magic so that you can have full capabilities. the problem is that you don't learn it. You kind of get thrown into these situations, and it's survival, and it's about pushing yourself and getting you to where you need to be to maximize your abilities. So I really threw out the whole traditional school system, going and learning other people's thoughts. And it's really like, what knowledge do we have within? Turn within, learn what we have as a survival, flight and fight response, and all these things that we just don't learn about, and really rely on that natural way of surviving through life. So yeah, I threw the school system out.
It kind of sounds like a magical boot camp almost.
It does, yeah. It sounds fascinating, yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My school system is kind of this weird mix between like it's not exactly boarding school, but the trainees go to live at a house, and so it's like kind of like homeschooling, with weapons training and fighting that goes along with it. And so it's definitely like, I wouldn't say it's an academy book or anything like that. If you're looking at that, it's more of how do they learn while they're going on these quests, and while they're fulfilling these missions, and while they're doing, like, school happens in between life in my books. Yeah. So it's a way to add like real reality, because like obviously if they're 16 they need to be doing some schooling, but it's not the main focus of the book. It's like things are going on, and then it's like, oh, we got to go to class now. So.
Yeah, that's good, because you don't want school to like dictate your whole life either, do you? Like,
right? Yeah.
Home stuff. And it's funny, when I look back at my childhood, I don't remember school. I don't want to remember school. I remember what I did in the afternoons. And
right. I remember the books I read after school, not everything I learned in school. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I remember the school library more than anything else.
Right. Yeah.
I spent most of my off hours in the library. That's how I started reading the Horatio Hornblower books, which are probably the entire reason why I wrote my nautical saga. But yeah, that's all Star Trek's fault, by the way. The reason I read the Horatio Hornblower, because I read somewhere that Gene Roddenberry based Captain Kirk on Horatio Hornblower.
Oh, that's
so. Of course, me being the Star Trek fanatic that I am, I had to go read those, and they're actually books, so.
Good. Yeah.
I'm put two and two together. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of weird things and read a lot of weird stuff based on some of my geekness. So
I think we have to have something weird about us in order to present in a book, because if we were all like everybody else, like what makes us unique, we have to have that one thing. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, by the way.
Right. Well, for me, I like to find those quirks for my characters, because I feel like characters are a big part of, like, to get back to world building. Characters are a big part of world building, and that, you want to make them believable and relatable. So giving your character like that quirk that they are a huge Trekkie or a huge Star Wars fan, or they read books based on, certain recommendations. Like giving those little details is what really brings them to life for me, as a writer, and then also as a reader. When I'm reading about other people, I'm like, I look for those quirks in the characters.
Yeah, it's so true. And when you said that the characters relate with the world building, that they are so connected to the world, because that's how they react to things that are happening. And if they don't react correctly, then you can't. You just don't have that believability attached to them,
right?
And you can't fall into those, because it's like having a cliff in the middle of a city. We're not just going to walk off it. People need that proper reaction, and you need to be in that world. So if you're not reacting to it or correctly, then you've lost the readers. So
that is so true, because I was doing a sample edit for someone who is looking for an editor, and they had like this great plot going on, and they had the characters, but there was no world building. There was no like, are they even in a room right now? Like, where are they? Like, what is going on? What do they look like? What are they wearing? Like, what is going on around them? There was no setting them in a time and a place. to give the story, like to make the story come to life, because I was just like, these are just voices like shouting into the void right now. Like there's like, it just was all white space. And I was like, you need that world in the background and you need the characters interacting with that world to really get the story started.
That's right. And this goes back to that plot. If you're too heavy on
exactly.
two things, you forget one plot. Yeah, you need to keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Speaking of characters, how did you two get into the mind of the young protagonist that you have in your books?
Oh, that's a good question. I always feel like there's some trick that like young adult writers are supposed to know, like how do you get into the mind of like your teenage self or something. I go more based off like personality though than like age quirks, you know, because I feel like, you know, every teenager is different. You know what I mean? Like you can't just like typecast all teenagers as being like really like bubbly or outgoing, and you can't cast them all as being like moody and introverted either. So like it's really finding the parts of like the character's personality that speaks to me. Like Bree, like I feel like all the characters have a little pieces of me. Like they're not me. You know, I'm definitely not Mary Sueing it, but like I find pieces of myself that find homes in each of my characters. So whether it's my anxiety or whether it's, you know, like when I am outgoing and bubbly and can crack jokes all the time, like that'll go into one character, and you know, my more philosophical nature will go into another character, or you know, like little pieces will find their homes. But what I find really helps me is the Myers-Briggs personality types.
Okay.
Like looking at the types and saying, you know, they're really justice minded, or they're really like they're more about intuition and emotions rather than rationalizing. Like finding those pillars of their personality like really helps me to like access the character in a really fast way, especially if they're like a secondary character where I'm like, I don't need to spend pages and pages delving into their character. I can just be like, oh, they're like this personality type, and then I get a good idea of who they are at the backbone.
That's really good. I like that. Yeah. That seems like a more simplified way to do it than I do it. I think of them as real people, and they're like jump into my head, or they're there, and I kind of have to discover who they are. So Eli came to me halfway through writing Conceal Power, and that's co-written with Michelle Crow, who lives in America, and I'm in Australia. So, you know, time zones, other side of the planet, it's difficult. So I had a little bit of wriggle room into writing time off. So these characters just kept jumping into my head and trying to distract me, and I'm like, I need to like turn this off and kind of focus on these deadlines because they were coming thick and fast. So I was like, you know what, I just need to focus on this character because he's annoying me. So I was kind of like following him and seeing this story, and he was giving me these little glimpses. And I thought, oh my God, there's a story here. I need to write this. So I was writing Conceal Power and brainstorming The Reluctant Wizard at the same time. And now that seems to be my default. I have to do 3 or 4 books at a time now. And so I never really know what exactly he is as a whole person, because we never know what other people are like, and sometimes we even scare or surprise ourselves what we're capable of doing. So I never understand a character fully going into a story, and half the time when I finish a story, I'm like, oh yeah, and now I see this character like this and this. Like I just don't want to know them fully, because I want to present what I'm seeing this character go through the story, but at the same time I want the reader to kind of feel their way through it like I did, and because the reader brings so much to the story, so I don't want to confirm that they have this type of personality or this type of structure, just in case the reader feels it's different, that there's something different. Anyway, so that's how I kind of come to like characterization, which was probably if I had to study that at uni or something, it would be a nightmare because there's no tick this box. And you know how you get characterization sheets, and then you fill them out, what they like and what they dislike. I can't for the life of me do one of those. because I couldn't fill one out for myself. I don't want to know the ins and outs of everything that I'm capable of doing or willing to do, or how would I be in a survival situation, because we're not like that in a day-to-day situation. So for me, it's just a matter of seeing a character and kind of throwing them into situations, seeing how they react. That's all in my mind, not on paper. And then going, you know what, this is perfect for the story and it's got to be integrated somewhere. So that's how I kind of come to characterizations and jumping in their shoes and just let them wander through my mind.
Yeah, I would say when it comes to the young adult stuff, you don't want to like dumb down the characters, but you do want to keep in mind that they don't have as much experience. They don't have the same kind of maturity levels as adults. And so it's not necessarily that you have to like put yourself back into like, what was it like being a teenager, but like remembering like, what was it like to have your first kiss, and what was it like to like discover you like someone for the first time. Like it's just those new experiences rather than like just being like, oh, this is old hat by now. They're going into a fight and they haven't had those high stakes before. So how are they going to react to that for the first time?
Yeah.
That's what I keep in mind writing young adult, is just that, like, you know, the new experiences and how it feels to go through it for the first time again. Kind of attitude.
Okay, we got a couple of questions here from the audience. So
awesome.
Joe asks, do you feel like the tropes that used to bind authors to the rules when it comes to writing YA are easier to break now and have loosened, or do you feel that it still separates and defines the genre?
I would say this probably depends on whether as an author, you're trying to get into schools or not. Because if you're trying to be part of curriculum or like do school tours or whatever with your book, then you're going to do things like be more careful about swearing and what kind of adult content that you kind of have in your stories. I definitely don't think that necessarily there should be a real difference between, like, you know, like when we look at the Hunger Games, like it's very much life and death. It's very much serious matters that the teenagers are dealing with. And I don't think that we should, like I said, we shouldn't baby the characters or change that at all. But I think that if you are saying like, yeah, I want to get into my, you know, teenage daughter's high school curriculum, then maybe you're not going to go for the really like hard-hitting themes of drug addiction, maybe, you know, like it really depends on like what your goal is as an author, I guess.
Okay. I don't like tropes. I don't write them, but again, some authors I like them, and readers love them, especially like in the fantasy genre. But for me, I came to young adult writing a book for my children because I was writing fantasy, adult fantasy, and they can't read that for many, many years. So I wrote a book and I leaned on my adult world building into young adult. So I have themes. I didn't know I had themes until after the editor goes, these themes are great. So they would come naturally. But they looked at, you know, the effects of war. You know, we've got wizards versus warlocks and the community suffering. So, and I did not dumb that down at all. There's people starving. There's people homeless. There's people are struggling. And there's this kid who goes, you know what? I'm going to grow up and save the world. I'm going to grow up and fix all this. I've had enough. I'm the one that's savior. And, you know, we knock him down. We knock him down like in real life situations to say, no, the world's not yours to fix. You know, you're one link in the chain. You can make an impact, but you can't save the world. So I really kind of leaned onto real life scenarios and adult ways of thinking, but for children. So if a child reads my book, it will be a matter of their level of understanding. So if they start at 12, they're going to get the 12-year-old reading. But if they reread it as they get older, they're going to find different layers. And again, it's leaning into that feeling like, okay, I feel for that person who's begging for food. But a child reading that goes, oh, that guy's without food. Like they're not going to know the extent that he hasn't been without food for days. not until he's older and they do the rereading, then they'll understand just how powerful that moment is. So I just kind of stay away from the tropes, only because I'd have to research all of those tropes, and I've got so much that the world needs to explain and the character needs to explore first.
Well, I think that's a great point, is that young adult really should focus on themes, not tropes.
Yeah, it has to be for what's right for the book and the character. Because if you have this great story, great characters, all of this stuff going on, then then you try and add a trope or something that, because tropes are like ticking as well. Like they have expectations. If you don't follow through on those expectations, then you're kind of going out of the boundaries. We can get away with that with fantasy because you don't want to replicate a trope each time. But for something like a romance, it kind of needs to be ticking those boxes in order to become a proper, well-accepted book. So fantasy and spec we're lucky that, we can push those boundaries. We can snap them and get rid of them. But yeah, for young adult books, I think you're completely right. Go for themes.
Focusing on themes is a great way of finding the heart and the meat of your story. And I don't mean necessarily like preaching morals or anything like that, but like the theme of doing what's right when it's hard or something like that, can be a really powerful story. And it just, like I said, it kind of gives like the heart to your story and can like guide your character motivations and everything that's going on without having to worry about tropes.
Great answers. Okay, so our second question is from Richard, and he asks, when world building in fantasy YA, is there a big difference in how you create your world for a younger audience?
No, mine's pretty much on par with the adult one, other than Concealed Power because that's set in real life. But for the Reluctant Wizard, the world is pretty full on. You're still looking at the movements of the planet, and because that dictates how long the day is and how long the night is. Actually, if anything, my world got more complicated and more complex than my other books. And I thought honestly, when I first started writing it, I was like, this is going to be a 30,000 word book, and it ended up being my longest, and it's sitting at 110,000 because the world is so complicated. And I don't think we need to dumb it down or anything, or even over-explain things. We just put things in, like seeds, put a seed in that reader's mind and let it sprout. And when it does sprout, we'll explore that in book 2 and 3 and 4. So I kind of mapped it out, and I drew proper maps and everything. And as the character goes through all the different sections of the society, then they will kind of explore that part of the story. So it's because it's so focused around the community and the wizard land, that they need to focus on, this part of this, he'll have it, one part of this section will have a different story, and then it will keep going. So if anything, I more complicated it than I would have for an adult book, because you can more lean into plot rather than world building. But kids can cement those world building ideas easier than a plot idea. That's how I kind of approached it. But who knows? If I go into book 2, it might be a totally different system again.
I would say for me, it doesn't necessarily change the way I world build, but it changes the way I describe things. Because, you're describing things from your POV character, and what a teenage boy notices is going to be completely different than what a 40-year-old mom is going to see when she walks in a room.
Yeah.
Like a teenage boy is going to walk in and say wow, this place is really clean, and I'm going to go straight to the fridge. You know what I mean? They have a very distinct way of thinking. Whereas the middle-aged mom comes in, she might be noticing the price of the furniture. She might be noticing how big is that big screen TV, and, more adult focused, judgmental ideas. You know what I mean? What we see and what we place value on is very different for a 10-year-old boy or, a 16-year-old girl. So like I tried to think more through the eyes of my character. When I walk in the room, what are they going to notice about the people, places, and things? And what value are they going to put on that? And so it's not necessarily that I'm changing how I build up the world, but just how I describe it, I guess.
Yeah. I like that.
So basically, you would say that your world building is adult, but it's how the character is perceiving it is what you're presenting to the reader.
Yeah, like so. Yeah, when I'm writing, I dabble in other genres for fun. So like if I'm writing a horror story, I don't approach how I build the monster's reality and the character's reality. I don't change that from genre or book to story or anything like that. But yeah, like how you present it to the reader changes because
Okay.
that POV character is always changing. So.
Okay, so since you are primarily marketing the book, say, to a younger audience, a YA audience, because you have a YA characters in your book, how did you deal with the more darker aspects of the book? Did you were you unflinching in them, or did you dial them back a little bit?
I tried to have emotional impact on the characters. One thing I really respect when I read other young adult books that I feel like get it right is like when they show things similar to PTSD. Like you go through a traumatic event or you go through a battle or a fight or a war, and it's going to affect you. I mean, killing someone for the first time. I try to, like for me, my book deals with demons and demon kind. And so like, it's not exactly like killing humans, but like if they were to kill a human, that'd be a very different feeling. And how would they react to it? And I don't, my first book, some people were a little shocked by the first chapter because there's a torture scene. But the character that is doing the torturing is a half demon. And so he's really reveling in it. So I tried not to get too dark, but also to be realistic, if that makes sense for a supernatural being.
Yeah.
Like you want to show the realism of the world and the hardships of the world without being gratuitous, I guess, is how I approach it. I, don't get into every drop of blood or, every like violent thing, but I also try not to sugarcoat it too much either.
That's
Okay.
really cool.
So what about you, Amanda?
The being a bit more realistic, because if you have your demons and everything, if they're not relatable, then you're not gonna feel that fear because you go, oh, that's different. Like you're pulling it away. So, what about me? Sorry.
I said, what about you? How did you deal with the darker elements? Because I mean, one of the themes in your book is actually war. So,
yeah. So he doesn't see the war itself. He only hears about the war. Because when you have children in real life war, you prep them and you prepare them because you don't know what's going on. So he gets this prepping, he gets this preparing. So if something happens, you need to do this. If that happens, you need to do that, because that's a real life scenario. There's no fighting on the streets, but there is fear. And people are scared of fear itself. So he sees the community come together and say, look, the resources have been poisoned. The water supply has been poisoned. We have to rely on these wizards to bring in resources. They fixed all the other communities, but we're not fixed. And so there's this fear of hunger and starvation and, there's no water and what are we going to do? And people are fighting. And so there's that type of war scenario. It's that real life consequences of war that's happening, but the war's not on the streets. It's just they hear about it. Hear about the things. I definitely give that a child perspective from the book, and he's very prepared. He knows that stuff's going on. This is his real life thing. So I didn't over explain it either, because that's when you have somebody in real life, you don't notice these things that are unusual until somebody else comes in and says, hey, that's weird. So I kind of put him in that shoes as this is my normal. But something
I love that.
So then he pulls in all these things that only the reader will know, but he's just like, oh, that's so normal though. So then we can kind of question, okay, why is he thinking that's normal? Is this the effects of war? He's normal when really we know that's not right. So that's how I kind of prepared and I was very conscious of younger readers understanding that. But at the same time, my children know about wars and the horrific things that happened in the past, like the Holocaust and things, because children need to know these things. Do I put it in my books? No. I'm putting it in from a perspective of real life consequences. And that is hunger, starvation, homelessness, things like that. That's how I approached it.
I love that though, because like I'm just thinking off the top of my head, there's an author who talks about writing about war, and I wish I knew who the author was or the quote better, but he says something along the lines of, you don't write about, the person getting shot in the street, you write about the baby shoe that's left in the dirt at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like you write about those little, like that's what haunts you, is those little realistic, real life moments of, this person hasn't eaten in 3 days and they're just lying in the gutter, trying to survive.
Yeah.
The more emotional aspects of it.
Yes. Yeah, I love that.
If you put a baby or a baby shoe in, everyone has that natural protection to jump in and save a baby, no matter whose baby it is. But when they have to jump in and save an adult, there's that question of, oh, should I? Like, shouldn't they save me? But a baby is just off the chart. So that's where you pull heartstrings is, a baby shoe will just kill everybody's heart. Right. But I think we're a bit more open as well with this next generation. They're smarter, they've clicked on, they want to know. We don't need to, wrap our children up in wool anymore. We can say, look, this is the things that have happened in the past, because we don't want them to happen in the future. But there is a lady who's writing about the Holocaust. Her name, the book's called Anna Suitcase or something like that. If you Google, you'll find it. And it's this suitcase that comes to this child in America, and she unravels it, and it's like from the Holocaust. It's a leftover suitcase that didn't make it, and hands down. So this child then has to go through and discover all these things, and it talks about it, and it's just unraveling these horrific events that happened in the past, but at the same time educating children. So, and that's the beauty of art, is that we can present the most horrific things in such a way that you go, okay, I understand that from the perspective, and I need to know more. And it kind of plants that seed for when they do grow older, they can prepare and they can lean back on that literature in a safe learning way to learn more about our planet's.
Yeah, I feel like we need to give more credit to young readers. I remember one of the most powerful, that reminds me of a school assignment I had to do. We were learning about the Holocaust, and, we had to narrow our belongings down to 2 suitcases, then 1 suitcase, then 1 bag, and then just one thing. And eventually, you get stripped of even your name, which is what happened, to those people. So it's like, that was such a powerful way of learning it. But, you can write in that way as well. Like she was saying with the suitcase in the book, of unraveling that suitcase and finding out about the person and what happened to them.
Yeah.
You can really humanize these huge events that happen.
That's right. And so when we're pushing these children, like these characters in these horrific events, and they are relatable because you're leaning on this survival instinct and what's going in reality. But with these children that are reading the books today, they might not come across those scenarios, but when they see people who are struggling in the street, who are begging for money, who are homeless, they've got that empathy, like, oh, actually, I read a book about this and how hard it was, and they're building that empathy and that understanding, instead of saying, oh, look at that person, he failed the society, let's just walk past and ignore him. That's not a good way of raising children. So when we do lean into these harder, darker topics, we are trying to teach our children what humanity is about. We have people suffering. and we've had horrific events, like absolute genocidal events that should have never happened. These children need to know about this, and books and art are the best way to kind of open up their world.
Okay, we have another question from the audience here. Okay, so Stacy wants to know, how do you manage potential parental social reaction to the whole social appropriateness in YA literature, especially when it comes to darker elements, i.e. protests around depiction of violence? And I'd also add depiction of sex in that, because that's the one that usually gets the most parental reaction.
That's tough, because like I said, if you're really wanting to be in like part of your school's curriculum and doing stuff like that, then there is kind of a line that people feel they need to walk, and then there's the whole, are we censoring, or should we be exposing or children to this? But I feel like that's one of the great things about being able to write speculative fiction. And one of the reasons why I love writing fantasy is not just the everyday magic that we get to put into books, but we can kind of explore societal issues without taping them down. Like if we're talking about, don't use, don't call a muggle born a mudblood because it's a dirty word. Like we can kind of talk about societal issues of discrimination or, mistreating others because of their societal position or, their class or, whether they're muggle born or whatever. You can kind of twist it in a way of exploring it without being like, we're talking about this specific societal issue that's going on right now. So it's it gives you like a safer way of going through it. And also helping children to understand by saying like, well, it wouldn't be fair to treat Jenny differently just because of who her mom is compared to who John's dad is, right? So you can apply that to real life, but using, these filters of fantasy and magic and, other ways of exploring the issues that just feel safer. To me, they feel safer in some ways than just like getting into the nitty gritty of, these issues.
I don't really do sex or sexual issues or anything in my books, even my adult books. I do co-write, and she's a romance author, so if there's sex, it was her. If I need something, I go, write me a scene here. So I'm not
blame the sex on the other author.
Yeah, that's right. I can do the dark stuff, but yeah, there's romance stuff up straight over my head. So that wasn't an issue in my book, but for the appropriate stuff, it's hard because there's like a political correctness that goes on, especially in the trade publishing world. They don't want adults touching children, even in an can't even say it now, empathy way. So like there was some talk in some Australian publishers where the adults were hugging the children. Now, I have hugs in my book from the parent, because there is nothing that words can describe a loving hug from a parent, especially if you're having a hard time. But they don't want that touching, they don't want these interactions, and that limits that non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is so much more powerful than what we can come out of our mouths. So, I can say I love you, but if you just run across the room and just give your mum a big hug, or your dad a hug, or whoever it is that's raising you, for no reason at all, that says a lot more than I love you. So I kind of push back on the political correctness that the trade publishers definitely want. In The Reluctant Wizard, I've got children who are at risk of dying and who are dying, who are tortured. We don't see it. We hear about it. We understand that it's going on in that world. But, there could be, if I went down the trade route, it probably would have been a massive issue. I think we have to really trust the readers that we're putting this book into. So, I have 3 children myself. 2 of my children would absolutely love this book. One of my children, no go. He's too sensitive that it would break his heart. But if we're active readers ourselves and we know what our children would love and what they would cope with, then we can safely say, okay, yes, read this, no, wait till you're older, or prepare them and say, look, this book is hard, it has these things, are you sure you want to go ahead with it? And then when they go through these books, you can sit down and have these conversations at dinner because you know what they're reading, you've read it yourself. So
reader discretion is a really important thing. Knowing what you as a reader, or what your child as a reader is capable of understanding and processing, is like just huge, because it's like ultimately, I can write a fade to black violent scene or death, and it's not going to be gory, but how that affects your child as a reader is up completely determinant on the child who's reading it.
That's right. Everyone has triggers as well. Adults have triggers. They know what they can and can't read. Like, for my trigger is rape. I cannot have anything to do with the story if it's featured. But can I watch, a whole war, like cut each other's throats? Yeah, I'm totally there. That's my thing. I love it. So I think children have triggers and what they can and can't do. It's just a matter of approaching literature and saying, okay, these books are great for you and these books are great for you, and figuring out what your children like. So, some children need to know more about sex younger than other children. And, we need to have books there that prep them for that. So I think every single topic needs to be explored in the right way and for the right age. It doesn't mean every child needs to read every book. No, they need to find what they need to. Yeah, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I know I read some very adult books as a young child. I mean, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street when I was like 2, like I did inappropriate things as a child all the time, but I
still haven't watched that movie, so yeah.
No spoilers. I won't give you any spoilers. But I was watching horror films as a toddler. I wanted to be watching what my big sister was watching, and all that stuff. So I definitely dove headfirst into adult themes, and I did not find it to be damaging. I found it to be something to think about, something to contemplate and say, like, why did I have this reaction to the character dying? Like, why did it move me so much? Because they were a good person, and it teaches you lessons, and so it really does depend on the reader. And I think that as a parent, if you have concerns, then that's a great point. Talk about it over dinner. Like, why do you want to read this book, and what do you think you'd get out of it? And how can we learn about this topic together? If you don't think the book is appropriate, then what is a more appropriate way for us to learn about this subject matter?
Yeah, and leaning back on like sex, for instance, and the adults, it would be great if there was more books out there that teach children what healthy and unhealthy relationships are, especially in family dynamics. Books should have people having inappropriate moments and having the characters react in a proper way. This prepares children for those moments. Deleting them completely out of all literature is ridiculous. And if I wish I had those books to kind of go, you know what, I don't like this. This is making me uncomfortable. I like how that character reacted to this, especially young girls who are dealing with older men, who are, if you have a character come up and there's like a sleazy, I don't know, uncle or man at the shop or whatever, how do you react to that? How do you put people back in their place, and how do you empower these children? Books are the way to do it. Movies are not the way to do it. They can be doing, but then, they kind of get washed down a bit. It becomes inappropriate. You're putting a child actor in that situation as well. So I think literature is like the perfect way to do it, because you can read it, you can reread it, you can go and ask questions about it. We can do talkings like this. But
and I have in my new book, I have that older character that likes the 16-year-old girl, and she's like, no, sir, you are too old for me. Like, this is, we're friends, and that's how we're gonna stay. And I feel like it's important to address things like that, like and represent healthy boundaries.
That's right. That's definitely right. Because I even the other day I was out at the shops and this lady just was like blah at me, and I don't even know what I was doing. I think it was picking apples, and she just randomly come out, and I turned back and I said something to her, and I'm like, where did that even come from? Like, it just come out of my mouth, and it was like a book from the Odyssey. I was like, blah, 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 blah at her. And I was like, wow, we really do get influenced so much by books. And I kind of walked away from that situation and go, wow, I wonder what my books would do to somebody in that situation. So for young adults, I can just imagine how it would shape their adulthood because it gives you the tools and the resources in going into adulthood and the workplace and further study and all sorts of things and situations where we're not comfortable. So we do need to kind of stop deleting things out of books and pushing them further and say, actually, this is making me uncomfortable. Why is it making me uncomfortable? Let's push it in there. Yeah. Let's have a conclusion to it. Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a good place to end the panel because we're coming up on the end of the hour here. And so I'll let you two introduce. I'll let you two tell everybody where they can find you and your books. We'll start with Julia. So,
okay, I am Hijinks Writer on most social media, and you can find me at hijinkswriter.com. That's my new website. So yeah, come find me.
I'm AA Warren, and you can find me at aawarren.com. And I have limited edition The Reluctant Wizards out now, which you'll find on Facebook. So you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at AA Warren. Nice and simple.
Okay, so and I'm your host, A.F. Stewart, and I definitely do not write YA books. So, so if you are interested in YA books, don't read my stuff. But you can find me on my website at afstewart.ca or on Facebook at my Facebook group, A.F. Stewart's Minions. So, and I'd like to thank my guests, Julia and Amanda, for being here tonight. It was a terrific panel.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll be back Saturday with 2 more panels and Sunday with another 2 panels. So please join us at LitCon for those. So bye for now. I'll see you all tomorrow.